Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the latest episodes in the Jason's Take On podcast series with myself, Jason Noble, here in the sunny United Kingdom in London, and my partner in crime, Jason Whitehead. Say hello, Jace.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here, and thanks for joining us.
We are super excited today to have another phenomenal guest on with us. We have Esben Friis-Jensen, who is the co-founder and chief growth officer at Userflow, who are a product company focusing on in-app onboarding and surveys, and really going through that product growth and product success to try and generate. So Esben's going to talk to us today about product-led growth. It's something that we've talked previously on the podcast before. We had Dave Jackson on, wow, it must be about a year ago now, Jason.
Yeah.
And it is an area that's growing in traction. It's growing in demand. So we're really excited to have you here with us, Esben. So welcome.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here.
Could you, before we get into the podcast itself, could you give a quick intro to our listeners into you, your background, why you do what you do, and what you're currently working on?
Yeah, as some might notice, I have a weird accent, which is from Denmark. So that's where I'm originally from. But I live in San Francisco, in California. I've been living here for the last 8 years. I did a company called Cobalt, which I co-founded with 3 other Danish guys back in 2013. And today it's a 200 people company, raised Series B and so on. Pretty successful. It's in the security space, doing what's called pen test as a service. But recently, I decided to leave Cobalt. They're doing great, so they didn't need me as much anymore. I decided to go back to the early stage startup game, which I really like, and decided to do Userflow with one of my friends. He had been working on it for a couple of years, building the product, and now he really wanted it to grow, so I joined him as a co. And one of the reasons I did that was in Cobalt, we had a project to become more product-led. And I really found that exciting. I always seen products as being one of the key things for success, and the product should lead more. So you're less people dependent. So I found that super, super interesting. And then when I got so interested in it that I got excited about joining him and be a vendor in that space. So yeah, it's a really exciting journey, and we're just getting started.
I think it's so cool because it is, like you say, not only is the new startup space for you exciting, there's lots of changes and challenges there, not only with the current working situation with COVID, but come from a project where you've seen this product-led stuff that you want to do to actually then building it out. This is, I can imagine you say this with a big smile on your face, but really exciting time for you there.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've seen a lot of great companies succeed in product-led growth, and that's what's driving this big trend right now. Yeah.
Let's jump in and talk about that a bit more. This idea of product-led growth, it's still relatively new, and a lot of people don't fully understand it. Can you just create a bit of context and tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing and why it's so important, and really what it is?
Yeah. No, very happy to do that. So first of all, I don't think it's new. I think it's a new term that has rebranded something that has actually existed for a while. It's basically like the essence of software as a service, right? Is that you build a great product, you do a free trial, and you really have the product sell itself. But I think one reason why it hasn't gained as much traction earlier is maybe that in the beginning, like software as a service was replacing the service industry, and the service industry has always been high touch. So it was like sometimes a bit easier to maybe go a bit the high touch route in software as a service as well, at least in the beginning, because you could then like still sell it at a high price. But I think now the market has matured so much that people don't want to necessarily talk to people anymore. They really just want to try the product. They want to learn about it themselves and then ask questions if needed. And that is why the trend is then really coming into visibility now, right? And then on top of that, you've had some companies like Zoom, Slack, etc., that has really shown that you can build a strong business and grow fast with this model. So I think it's always been there, but it's basically this idea of selling, letting the product do the selling for you and retention.
I think it is. It's such an exciting, and I love the way, but it's like customer success. It's something that we've been doing all along, but called it something different. It's so right with this idea of product-led growth. What do you? It is because it is such a newish area in this terminology, and a lot of companies are not yet embracing it. What do you see as some of the big challenges for leaders and companies to shift their way to be more product-led and move away from perhaps sales-led or technology-led or even customer-led growth? How do you see them going about making that transition?
Yeah, it's a tough one. So if you're a brand new startup and building product-led from day one, many startups will always do that because they don't have the capacity to do anything else. But for them, it's easy, right? You build a free trial, you build self-sign-up, all this stuff. But if you're a company, let's say Cobalt, of 200 people or any other company that size, where you have been used to a sales-led, high-touch kind of model, there's a lot of change management that needs to happen. Basically, you have a bit of a silo. It's not fair to say that it's completely siloed because there's always been an interaction between product and customer success and sales and so on. But I think in product-led growth, it really needs to come really close to each other. People needs to be really aligned, and product needs to understand a lot more about the business than they used to do. They basically need to, and also challenge the business, right? Because when you're building a new model, you have to sometimes cut some things off that why are they there? In a high touch model, you do many things that are technically maybe not needed. And that's a tough decision to cut those things off. And it can seem really scary for a lot of people.
You know, I like what you're saying about the change management aspects and especially when I think of moving from more of a sales led to a product led. What are some of the new things that a sales department needs to change to really support product-led growth? Is there something that the sales team needs to stop doing, or that you need to hire a different type of salespeople or incentivize their compensation differently for a product?
Yeah, I think segmentation is key here, right? What is your strategy really around product-led growth? Are you going to do it for all segments? Are you going to do it for all sizes of businesses? Are you going to do it only for maybe the smallest businesses? And I think whatever you decide there, that becomes important, right? Because if it's for all segments, then you need to teach your entire kind of like Salesforce or customer success team to be part of that process. But if you segment it a bit, for instance, and only focus on the smaller businesses, then you can maybe you can build a dedicated sales team just for that segment and a dedicated customer success function just for that segment, which who knows that they need to do more low touch. I think a big challenge for sales is that as long as you keep them involved and you don't force them to get rid of the touch, right? They have a tendency to drive the high touch themselves. Because they want to sell. They want to give the best support possible. Yeah. So the logical thing for them is to maybe sometimes ask for a meeting, ask for a call, ask for these things. And really what you want to do is have the customer ask for those things in a low touch model, right? It shouldn't be you going and incentivizing that behavior because as soon as you do that, you create a kind of model where the customer expect calls to happen, and that's a natural part of the flow.
Yeah. That's a really difficult transition to make, isn't it, as well? I've worked in very high-touch environments for a lot of my career, and it's kind of a model that you enjoy doing. You enjoy delivering like that. There's a lot about relationships, but actually that shift away from that around to more automation and product can be very difficult to do. And like you say, you've still got to, part of your segmentation, also understanding what experience level do your customers want? What level of touch do they want? You can't make an assumption that these guys can be low touch. We can just give them the automation. You've got to really understand your customers better. Do you, from the companies and customers that you guys have worked with, what are some of the ways that they've gone about operationalizing the implementation of product-led growth that you can share this? So if they've got the strategy, the vision that, yes, we want to do product-led growth, how do they go about operationalizing that? And as you've mentioned earlier on about change management, there's behavior changes. How do they start internally to do that? And then also, how do they take their customers on that journey?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I think, again, it comes back to what is the company? Is this company a company that's already product-led and like already very product-driven and maybe never had sales team was? You have that type of company where a sales team and a customer success team was like an afterthought. It was something, okay, now we need to add that in. And for those, they've built out a lot of this stuff natively. It just was part of how they grew their business and built it out. And then you have the other type of company where they maybe relied more on the demo request model, the high touch support from the early days, and now they want to do a transition maybe for the smaller customers or something like that. So it depends a bit on where you are in that. But what we are seeing is, I think a lot of these product-led companies, what comes down to is, of course, the first kind of decision I think is important, especially from the ones moving from sales-led, is to introduce that option of a free trial or a self-sign up. And that's already a big step, right? That's the first step you probably have to take, is to understand, okay, how do we get to that step? And maybe you do some iterations to do that, right? You could maybe start with like request a quote or something like that. Something that's a bit more self-service than a demo request, but is not a free trial. And another thing we're seeing in the market right now is, for some of these companies, they can also do something that's a bit similar to what we do. So UserFlow, we do in-app guides, right? So you have to sign in and then you get an onboarding. But there are also tools now where you can do like recordings, so interactive demos where you don't allow people to sign up to your application, and then you can do like a free trial with like dummy data. But if you then move iteratively to that free trial experience and you get to that point where you start allowing users to sign up themselves and try your product, then that's where we come in as a solution. So we are one of the solutions you use there, right? So you can build onboarding, and the power of something like our solution is it's no code. So you install a JavaScript snippet, and then you can have the product team or customer success team or UX team build stuff, and I think that's key. It's all iterations. The second big part, I think, is data. So being able to look at your users from a data perspective and see what are they doing. Like there are tons of product tools today where you can somehow track the users and see what they're doing and how they're interacting and what does that mean for their purchase behavior. So I would say that's another big piece. And then the third piece is communication, right? Yep. Even though it's a self-service free trial, you need a communication channel. Many sites today have the chat, right? Like the chat on their website. And that becomes even more important in a free trial experience where you need to have that open channel where they can reach out when they're sitting there with some kind of problem that you can do. And I think the second piece of that can, of course, be an email cadence that you kind of send out in a series of messages. So you want to attract the user. So it almost becomes like this marketing engine we always had before, right? Is now inside the product. So you're building all these things, all this communication you did on the public facing website, you now have to do inside your application.
What's the reception and feedback you've had from customers when you've done this? How do they take to that kind of in-app experience? What channels do they prefer? What's the market said to you?
Yeah, no. So of course, in-app guides, you can argue, why do we need them? Shouldn't we just build perfect websites and stuff like that? But reality is, even like the most perfect, good-looking websites out there, they have a lot of like kind of challenges in actually showing value. And one of the key things we focus on in UserFlow is that you should drive the user to their what you call aha moments, right? You want to drive them to see the value quick and understand what it can do. For instance, in our own product, it's a strong UX of how you build the stuff. And so we want to drive the user to play with that as quick as possible. So one of our first step in our checklist, onboarding checklist, is to basically go try our flow builder. So they get a feeling with it and what it can do. So that's an example. And that's also what our customers, they're not doing. They're building an onboarding checklist. And the first couple of tasks is basically the key kind of things you want the user to do. So this is not, often you fall in that trap where you start showcasing your entire product. That's not what you should do. You should really nail down what are those key actions the user want to see and do and focus on that instead of focusing on like giving them a complete overview of your, this page does, this page does. Nobody wants that. They want to see what value they can get from the product, right?
Right. No, I think that's so important. And it does sound like a different mindset, and a lot of organizations already struggle with their low touch approach. That this sounds like one more complexity for a lot of customer success folks and sales folks. Can you share a little insight around what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make when trying to implement a product-led And what are the pitfalls that people might not think will come up and bite them, but they should really pay attention to?
Yeah. No, I think I think the biggest challenge, especially for sales-led companies, is they overthink it, right? They think too much about what they need to do instead of just doing it more iteratively. And that is so important, right? You just need to work you need to go back and think a bit more like a early stage startup where you work in small iterations and work faster. Because if you overthink everything, you're never gonna see how the users actually react. And I think that's key, is you want to see how the users react to what you do. What if they got access to your product? What would happen? And then learn from that. The worst thing that can happen is nothing happen and you just reach out to them like you would have in a demo. So that's something you really have to think about. Is it's not that risky, because now you have their email, they signed up. Yes, they looked at your product and maybe didn't get value from it, but you can still reach out to them. So first of all, I wouldn't be scared about doing stuff. But then when you start diving into it, then I think a key thing is also, of course, from user flows perspective, and that's why I joined this company, is that you cannot just having said that, yes, you can let them in, but the result is typically then you have to reach out. But then what you lack is some kind of introduction to the product. How do you go and do this? How do I get to this value? And I think that is something that many maybe more native product-led companies forget about, because they just trust so much in their product that they let people in and then they hope for the best. But I know many like product-led companies where I have no clue what I have to do the first time I log into their application. I'm just sitting there clicking around a bit. And then I'm okay, maybe it's not for me, right? And then there are the tools where you get that, okay, I know exactly what I need to do, and this is awesome. Those are the tools you buy. So yeah, I think that's something that kind of many maybe forget. Yeah, so I think it's that mix again, right? The native companies, they might do too little sometimes, and the sales-led companies might try to overthink it too much and do too much instead of about things.
How do you see, we've talked about kind of customers and how they need to make this change, but what about your own companies? How do you take this kind of strategic idea that, yes, we're doing product-led growth? How do you take it as the top-down idea and make sure it filters down to the rest of the teams in an organization so that everyone there gets it, what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it? That must be equally challenging.
Yeah, that is the big change management exercise. In Cobalt, we had buy-in from all of us founders were bought into the idea of product-led growth, right? And that helps, because then you discuss it on a management level and they also get bought into it. It's especially key to have the VP of sales, VP of customer success, these kind of roles should understand that this is there and why we want to do it, because and they should buy into it as well, because otherwise it's going to be hard to get their alignment. And then it needs to go from there. I think it is important to have that top-down buy-in, and then you go from there. But it is a challenge all the way down to implementation. It's really like an alignment challenge between sales, customer success, and product, that they need to be much more closely aligned in this process. And that is a communication challenge. So I think what I would say is this is almost, at least in bigger organizations, you require some kind of program manager, somebody who's leading this initiative and aligning people, because otherwise it just ends up with too many opinions and then you never get anywhere. And then I think
that's something that we've spoke before.
No, but that is the challenge.
It is, but you need someone. It's like when you're selling to a customer, you still need somebody there that's going to help enable that change, and that you need that internal champion, and that's really difficult to do sometimes. It isn't just a case of plug and go. You need to make sure someone's there pushing it out.
No, it's not.
So let me ask you.
It needs to be a strategic initiative.
Yeah. Definitely. For an organization that has said, we buy into the value of product-led growth, but we've never done this before, and we need to move in that direction, how do they get started? Are there particular tools and technology that would allow them to quickly, like you say, iterate and go through and really ramp up these three things will really help you get there? Is there a particular skill set that they need to bring in an expert in X, Y, and Z that'll help them move forward? How does someone quickly get started on that iteration journey?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And luckily, there's a ton of great material out there for how you get started. A great community is there's productled.com, which is like a super community for product-led growth. Wes Bush wrote a book on product-led growth, which has, I think, ignited a lot of this trend and this movement we're seeing. He has kind of further ignited it by writing that book. And that's a good place to start, I would say. Read that book and have that as a baseline. Regarding bringing somebody in, I would say maybe in a very large organization, but otherwise I would say most people have an idea about software as a service. You typically would work in a software as a service model already. So it's not like rocket science. These are just like, it's changing the mindset a bit around, okay, how do we move to a more low touch product-led model instead of this high touch we're doing today? So I think a good place to start is there. That is what I would recommend. Yeah.
And we'll have a link to the productled.com in the show below.
That's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Look, Esben, this has been really interesting. A massive thank you for this. What we always like to do at the end of the podcast is present what we call a bold challenge question to our listeners as part of the podcast, and really have you provide the listeners with some actionable ideas from what they can do. So the question that we want to come back to you with is, what's the single most important bold action that you'd like to see companies take to develop and implement a product-led growth strategy? So one action. It's not easy.
Allow users to do a free trial. I think this is for sales-led companies. Allow them to do a free trial in your product. I think it sounds easy, but if you've been a sales-led company for a long time, it's not easy.
Do you see lots of companies, you talked about it earlier on, but do you see people moving in that direction? Is that something that's happening more and more, or is there still a lot of resistance?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a big trend that people want to move to that, especially for their smaller segment customers, which they know are very self-service or want to be self-service. And if you're a software as a service company, you actually have a hard time, I think, selling to SMBs if you don't have like self-service kind of model, because they don't want to they don't want to do demos. So I think it's a big trend we're seeing, and we're even seeing like freemium trend, right? That's the idea of Slack and Zoom. They've taken it all to freemium and really succeeded with that model. But not everybody. I don't think everybody can do that, but I think a free trial, especially in B2B, works well, right?
Excellent. Before you go, we always like to invite our guests to do a shameless plug. So if you want to say a little bit about UserFlow or any other initiatives that you're working on, please just take a couple minutes and let people know what you're up to and how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd love to say a bit about UserFlow. So UserFlow is, as mentioned, you can do in-app onboarding guides. So basically build onboarding checklists, onboarding guides, also highlight new features and even do surveys, so NPS, CSAT, etc. And you can do that basically without code. You just have to install a small JavaScript, and then we have this builder that anybody can use and build great onboarding. And given the topic today, I think why it adds value to be able to do it no code is really this product-led is an iterative process. So you always have to learn, improve. And that's really hard to do if you always have to involve developers. So that's one of the big powers of UserFlow, is that you don't need to do that. Yeah.
Esben, look, a huge thank you. This has been really enjoyable. As you said, it's something that Jason and I have been seeing a kind of a growing interest in this area, and I think we're going to see that trend continue. There's a lot of focus being done on this, a lot of new companies coming up, so it's really exciting to see the passion that you guys have for this, and we're looking forward to seeing what you guys do. So a big thank you from us.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No worries.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.